And we're back. So, as I mentioned in the previous video, that sort of standardized narrative around comics, one that's sort of epitomized by the documentary I showed you at the very beginning of the class, really puts a lot of emphasis on underground and then later on alternative comics as a turn towards more sophisticated storytelling in comics. I'm not trying to say that that is not the case. Indeed, as people like Paul Bill will talk about, political content of comics for adults and the alternative marker placed upon them did in fact bring to the fore narratives about community, identity, and politics that were not associated with sort of mainstream, quote-unquote, juvenile comics. Those comics were clearly for kids. Alternative comics were clearly not. At the same time, the legitimacy question around comics and comics as an art form is also being formulated at the same time we have the emergence of this sort of transition from underground to alternative. So publications like Arcade, which was a really important comics magazine that was published in 1975, 1976, took figures like Robert Crumb, who really became to symbolize the kind of counterculture, radical, contrarian art narrative, and many of the elements here, the critique of consumerism, sort of rejection of sort of like middle-class American norms, and the sexualization of women are on display in the work of many of the artists here in this publication. So these publications like Arcade, bring together a number of different kinds of artistic talents, right? Robert Crumb is probably one of the most famous underground artists, really breaks into the mainstream. But another figure here is Art Spiegelman, who, along with Crumb, and through publications like Arcade, he participated in Arcade, but also participated in a publication called Raw, really pushed the idea that comics can tell more sophisticated kinds of stories. And of course, Spiegelman is very important because his publication of Mouse was one of the first sort of graphic narratives that really sort of broke through into the mainstream, winning a Pulitzer Prize. And a number of other sort of auteur comic creators in the late 70s, early 80s emerged to start to tell really sophisticated, consistent comic narratives throughout the period. So another example of this is Cerberus by Dave Sims, who's a Canadian artist who produced this comic for more than a decade. It's like the longest running solo artistic production in comics. But one of the things about these productions, however, is that this emphasis on the art of the underground tend to gloss over the participation of women. Here I want to show you a little clip from a documentary we were supposed to watch called She Makes Comics.
People have this impression who don't go to conventions that it's all guys.
And I started to look around and realize there are way more women here than there were even last year.
The great thing about Comic-Con now is that you are as likely to see a stormtrooper take off their helmet and reveal like a lady with long flowing hair as you would a guy, and I think that's awesome.
Because I remember when I started going to cons, there was no line for the ladies' room, and now there is. The only drawback to women in the geek world.
And I've talked to women who are there dragging their dudes, which is pretty fun.
We can do it. There's been a bit of a backlash because women have called out some of the things that are a little sexist in comics. And by a little, I mean a lot. Even when you know that this person is probably not seriously threatening you with physical or sexual violence, how do they think that makes it okay to say?
A lot of times when a girl dresses up in a costume, a lot of people will judge her and say that she's not a real geek, that she's just wearing those costumes for the attention.
It's okay for a guy to like this comic book or that comic book or this character and not be a fountain of knowledge. But if girls come in and they're like, oh, this is really cool, I'm into this, I want to give this a shot, or I know a little bit of this, I want to learn more about it. The guys are like, oh, you don't already know everything about it? You suck. You are faking.
You're
Get
fake.
out.
You're fake.
It's so ridiculous that there's even a moment where women have to justify whether we like something or not.
We should just be happy that people are enjoying this medium that we all love. And I think in a weird way, a lot of the very negative things that have been happening to particularly outspoken women recently are actually a sign of us winning.
We don't have to explain to publishers that we have a right to be there. We don't have to explain to the fans we have a right to be there. The fans that think that we don't have a right to be there, they're the weirdos, not us.
So when I come back, we're going to talk about Trina Robbins and her legacy around championing women in comics.